Good morning, and welcome to our Harm, Healing, and Hope Conference. My name is Paula Kempfer, and I am the Outreach Coordinator for Restorative Justice and Abuse Prevention for the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis. We welcome those from our Archdiocese and all those from far and wide who are attending this conference. We are glad you have joined us for this morning of insight, challenge, and hope as we delve into some tough topics which are happening in our world today. Our goal for today is to bring light into the darkness that envelops our world and to challenge ourselves to go deeper into our minds and hearts to find a sense of healing and renewal as we seek to understand and live differently. I'd like to give you a sense of the flow of the morning. We will start with a film on restorative justice efforts in this archdiocese, and that will be followed by 3 different presentations by some of us who have used restorative justice practices in our work and ministries. After a brief break, a Q&A with the 3 presenters. We ask that you use the chat on the side of the Zoom to present any questions that you have for us. Our program is being recorded, and you will be able to find it after today on the website for the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, and also on the website of Our Lady of Lourdes Parish in Minneapolis. You may go to the site after today and post any questions that you might have. Also, if you have any feedback or suggestions for us, please don't hesitate to leave a comment. Father Dan Griffith will introduce our film.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you. Thank you for Zooming in with us. Really happy to be here with Paula Kempfer, my colleague in the Archdiocese in this work, and really honored to be here with Justice Janine Geske, who is really our headliner, if you will, and will speak from her vast experience in restorative justice and restorative practices. I am Father Dan Griffith. I'm pastor of Our Lady of Lourdes, from where we are broadcasting our Zoom presentation, and I am on the faculty of the St. Thomas School of Law, where I teach in the area of restorative justice, Catholic social teaching, and jurisprudence, and recently, like Paula last summer, was appointed to restorative justice work in the Archdiocese. Today we are really excited and humbled to publicly debut a documentary that chronicles the work of restorative justice in this archdiocese in response to clergy abuse. Julie Craven, who has taken care of our registration, has done a ton of work in the area of bringing communication support to this work. We'll get this link out to everybody who registered for today's program, and we hope you share it far and wide. It's a very inspiring film. And this effort was encouraged by Janine Geske and Mark Umbright, who were advising the Archdiocese and our Restorative Justice Working Group. The film is commissioned by the Restorative Justice Working Group to chronicle the important work that is being done here. All of us on that working group approach this work in humility, understanding that things got really, really bad here in the Archdiocese through failures of leadership and failures of vigilance with regard to the protection of children. But from the ashes, God is doing good work, and this film chronicles that work. So this is not a victory lap. We're not patting ourselves on the back, but showing others what can be done through the power of restorative justice. It was shot over several months, beginning last October, at a symposium for restorative justice, law, and healing at St. Thomas School of Law in Minneapolis. It encompassed a number of outreach opportunities here in the Archdiocese, in the Diocese of Wheeling, West Virginia, and also a recent trip to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It also encompasses a number of interviews, and we begin with a victim survivor and end with a victim survivor, including other interviews that were concluded this summer. You'll see the COVID reality of the outside interviews. And then penultimately on this film, we thank Hunter Johnson, the son of Tom Johnson, to whom this effort is dedicated in his memory. Hunter is a documentarian, a young man, gifted young man who just completed his master's in civil rights, and he brings so much head and heart to this work. It was a work of deep emotion for him and for Victoria, Tom's widow, and successor in the work of ombudsman for healing for victims of clergy abuse. So we thank Hunter for the extraordinary work. And just one word about Tom before we play the film. Tom was a longtime county attorney in Hennepin. He was the county attorney of Hennepin. He headed up the Council for Crime and Justice in Minnesota. And recently, as part of the settlement with Ramsey County, he was appointed the first ombudsman for victim survivors, an independent role. And I have never met anyone in my years on the planet and my years as a priest who had more of a preternatural, extraordinary and uncommon sense for justice and compassion. So Tom went to the Lord June 8th of this past summer, and we remember him very fondly, and we thank God for him. His memory is a blessing. So we're now proud to show you this film. It's called Restorative Justice in the Catholic Church and Beyond.
Why do folks go to church? They don't go to church to be lied to. They don't go to church to be harmed. They don't go to church to be intentionally misled or fleeced or misguided.
Authorities in Minnesota today announced criminal charges against the Roman Catholic Archdiocese in the Twin Cities.
Sexual misconduct among priests.
Clergy members suspected of abusing minors.
When I arrived here in the Archdiocese, we were in the middle of a storm. Eventually we would have over 300 claims of abuse against priests here in this Archdiocese, stretching over a period of 70 years.
You know, many folks have simply been ignored or shut out or disbelieved or told to shut up, or in cases which I simply can't begin to understand, the blame has been turned upon them. That may be among the worst kind of response to somebody who is suffering, who would like to be able to speak their truth, and then is told that not only is that not your truth, it's actually quite the opposite.
Today, I, as the leader of this Archdiocese, stand before you to say, we failed in what we have done and in what we have failed to do. Words alone are not enough. We must, we will, and we are doing better. Far-reaching changes are underway.
The victim survivors here are people who have been subject to a very grave injustice. I've heard stories that would break any person's heart from people who have held their abuse as a secret for decades and come to me as a way of trying to find resolution. Oftentimes, that resolution means finding a source to heal their wounds.
Victims want to be heard. They want to be believed, And oftentimes we do want something to happen.
This historic agreement ensures systemic change.
As we were trying to find ways of responding to that, and we had a situation not only with the bankruptcy but also with criminal and civil charges against the Archdiocese, we reached out to a number of experts, including Janine Geske. And so really it was in my encounter with Janine that I've come to know restorative justice much, much more intimately.
I was a trial court judge, and I would teach regularly in the prisons because I wanted to see where I was sending people and what was happening to them.
As a former criminal court judge and Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice, Janine Geske was well aware of the traumatic effects of crime on victims.
Somebody introduced me to a program at Green Bay Correctional Institution, which is a maximum security prison, and it was a 3-day intensive circle. And I was so struck by that experience. Not only listened to the men and their storytelling, but also the community members and particularly the survivors who told their stories of what had happened to their lives. And for me, those experiences were so incredibly spiritually moving. It was almost as though I could hear parables being told in my presence. I was so drawn to that work that ultimately I made the decision to do it almost full time, and it very much was a vocational call. But what happens in that room is that there is so much emotion and compassion for each other that everybody feels supported by the other. And as we passed the talking piece around several times, people feel incredibly peaceful that they've been able to share this in a warm community that's safe, that isn't questioning them, and for them to see that others that they made their prejudgments on, in fact, also have had challenges in their lives and difficult moments. There isn't a time that I walk out of one of those circles and that I don't think there's been some amazing work done, that the Spirit was present in the middle of that room and has touched people's hearts. It's often in ways that I'll never know.
There's been a number of ways that restorative justice has been used in the Archdiocese to promote healing. The principal work that I do is I preach monthly at different parishes in the Archdiocese, introducing Catholics to the concept of restorative justice, and also conduct listening sessions where they can talk about their feelings, what's in their heart and head with regard to the clergy abuse crisis.
Restorative justice is about 3 things. First is naming the harm, what harm was done. The second is about, who was harmed, whether it was the individual, family, friends, community. And then the third is about repairing the harm.
So the talking piece is going to be a rosary. So when you have the talking piece, you're just simply talking about what is in your heart or on your mind. And then you pass it to the left. If you don't want to talk, you just pass the talking piece. Nobody's forced to talk. The first question is, how has this affected you? Then the second question, are there signs of hope?
In a circle environment with other people, family, friends, parishioners, perhaps someone representing the church. In most instances, it's not going to be the perpetrator, and certainly wouldn't be the perpetrator if the victim survivor didn't want that person to participate. But I think it is helpful when there is a church representative there who, in the context of the circle, can say, we're sorry. What happened to you shouldn't have happened. You weren't at fault in any way.
When I hear people say, this is old stuff, we don't really need to be worried about this anymore, and I look at the people, particularly in the circles that have experienced trauma, this is the heart of pastoral care. I mean, this is really taking care of each other and being there for each other in a way that we're called to do.
I'm hearing people in the pews say, well, why don't these victims just get over it? And if people could see and hear victims, they wouldn't say that. You would never say that. because you hear the pain in their voice, and you hear what happened, and you hear how their family reacted, and you hear how the ripples ripped through their lives until until many of them are older and they still have it as a part of their life.
This is why it's so challenging when these crimes and harm were perpetrated by clergy and covered up by bishops. Because the church was always called by Christ to be a source of formation and healing, but in fact was a source of harm. Our late friend and colleague Tom Johnson refers to this as an inversion of the moral order.
All of us in the church are secondary victims. We've all been affected and many of us devastated. From my experience of being in a parish, people want to talk about it. And many times there's no forum put forth by the leadership in the parish to give them that opportunity. I think they just need to talk and know that they're being heard and listened to.
We talk about the way the clergy abuse crisis and the cover-up has affected average Catholics living their faith. When church leaders hear that, when Catholics hear that, there is a real sense of diligence and also being resolutely determined to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
From a survivor perspective, restorative justice is a way to facilitate a difficult conversation in a somewhat controlled way. It's not linear, it's that kind of 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but it is progress. I may not be a better version of myself tomorrow. And there have been times in my life where whole decades have not been better than the decade before. But it does give you some space in which to explore and kind of practice and adjust to whatever that better version of yourself, whatever I think that is.
I had just begun teaching at the University of St. Thomas School of Law, and I was introduced to several former offenders. Near the end of their prison sentences, they had taken part in a restorative justice program. And the more I heard about it, the more I realized it had to become part of my teaching. I reached out to some practitioners in the Twin Cities and invited them to come in and speak on restorative justice. And that began a whole education process for me. That meant I could bring in law students into the process, and I had the good fortune of teaming with Father Dan Griffith to teach a course that incorporated restorative justice all throughout the course of study.
And your thoughts to a different way of looking at how we should deal with wrongdoing in our society. So thank you for coming today. That's not our first panel tonight. I'm really having a terrific panel to lead us off. Not only are these colleagues expert in the field of restorative justice, they are experts even more importantly as practitioners.
The purpose of the event at St. Thomas Law School was to provide an introduction to restorative justice and restorative practices for those who might not have known what it is, and also to show all of the ways that restorative justice can be used in the legal field, and then also to show how it's been used in the settlement with Ramsey County and the Archdiocese.
I'm the middle of three sisters. My younger sister, Nancy Bishop Langart, was murdered when she was 25 years old. She was in her townhouse and there was an intruder there when she walked in the door along with her husband, and he shot both of them, fired execution style into my brother-in-law's head and shot my pregnant sister in her stomach twice. And when I learned that somebody had deliberately snuffed out their life with a gun, this sentence just emerged from me. I just said in front of everyone, I don't want to hate anyone. And I think that was my visceral reaction to something that was so evil and so almost incomprehensible that I knew it had to be responded to. And I also knew in that instant that it could not be hate, it couldn't be vengeance, it couldn't be bitterness, because if it were those responses, it would swallow me up in darkness. And I didn't want to go there. I knew there had to be another path besides hatred.
It has been so healing for me to go and sit with him, to hear him tell me things about Nancy's last moments that were so helpful to me. And for me to be able to talk about Nancy, because the more he gets to know her, he says that so here he is for what he did. And that's the best justice he can give me.
The victim survivors, they've been abused by people who they had trust in, priests, other clerics. They were shamed, embarrassed, and harmed deeply by it. And then the church compounded the problem by siding with, in most cases, with the abuser. And I just thought that if there was some way I could be of help to these people, I would give it my best effort. And it's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
When we're face to face with the honesty and of the harm that was committed, we as an archdiocese then have to be able to respond in a way that's equally honest. We recognize that we need to be held accountable, certainly accountable to those who have been hurt, and restorative justice circles are a great way for that. But also more broadly to the community.
I am very optimistic about restorative justice. I've seen it grow in so many different ways, whether it be police-community relations, whether it be racial issues, finding a way to give voice to people who've been harmed and who may have harmed someone else, and to find some pathway to peace and reconciliation.
This is a time of intense harm. We are in the midst of a pandemic, which has affected so many lives. The other experience that we're having is the harm of systemic racism and racial injustice. This is where restorative justice and restorative practices can be so powerful, because it invites people to tell their story.
This practice gives me a place to think about and to feel and to share with other people that isn't really otherwise available. Those ways of thinking and feeling about things, I have been changed by that.
The next step is to figure out, where do we go from here? There are a number of dioceses in this country that have not gotten to the place where a lot of the harm has been unearthed. Many have said we're not even ready for healing because there's still harm to be dealt with.
I would encourage other victim assistance coordinators to go to some of these trainings It would be a marvelous opportunity to learn about it and to implement it amongst the community of victim survivors that so need healing.